The mirror's power is the ultimate prize.
Ravenna's sister, Freya, rules a kingdom void of love as the Ice Queen with an army of huntsmen by her side. After Ravenna falls at the hands of Snow White, Freya seeks to expand her kingdom with the power of the magic mirror. Standing in her way is a former huntsman named Eric. The Good. If you are one of the several people in the world who are sick of Frozen at this point, Freya might be a nice breath of fresh air for you. Offering a different take on the character of the Ice Queen, and looking back on the movie now, I find her character arc to be pretty satisfying. I like the way the magic mirror was used in this movie. In addition to taking possession of it being the crux of the story, the mirror plays into the plot in a uniquely creepy fashion. Jessica Chastain plays another former huntsman named Sarah, someone from Eric's past. I enjoyed the way her character was portrayed and utilized in the story. And I also liked the chemistry that she had with Eric. This and some of the dialogue from the side characters provide a fair amount of amusement throughout the whole movie. The iffy. There aren't really great performances in this movie, mostly they're just serviceable. There are nuggets of performances here and there that I can get emotionally invested in. But generally speaking, most of the characters in this movie, especially the main characters, are just mostly melodramatic. Explaining the nature of this movie is a little weird. The first part of the movie is a prequel to Snow White and the Huntsman, explaining certain character backgrounds and such, and then the rest of the movie takes place after the events of Snow White and the Huntsman. It seems a little strange not to have Snow White involved very much in this story. Her presence in the movie is fabricated by mentioning her a lot, and by a brief shot with a body double early on in the movie. Given what this story was about, I don't really have anything positive or negative to say about Snow White's absence. More so, it just leaves me curious as to what kind of story it could have been if she was allowed to be involved more than she was. That being said, this movie tells its story in such a fashion that it can stand relatively well on its own from its predecessor. However, the bad. In the event that you have seen Snow White and the Huntsman, that makes the intro, which I mentioned was a prequel to Snow White and the Huntsman, pretty much tensionless. And even if you haven't, I feel like the second half of the movie, the sequel portion, is just relatively predictable. There's also some messiness in the writing department. If you've seen Snow White and the Huntsman, then there is one major inconsistency with the events that happened in that film. Throughout, there are also things in this movie that remain unexplained, has certain moments that don't mesh well with the emotional beat established in the previous scene, and also connecting two fairy tales and other mythological elements that don't always make the best connections with each other. But let me present the hypothesis that this movie is fine and it just needs to be reworked in a few minor places. I think one of the biggest improvements that could have been made was the way the events in this movie are arranged. As is, this movie is presented to us in such a way that very little is left to the imagination, and there's not very much room for the characters to develop. I almost can't believe I'm saying this, but I think if the prequel section had been cut and then they had reused some of these clips as flashbacks throughout the story, it would have made the story as a whole a bit more interesting. The movie would start right after the ending of Snow White and the Huntsman, certain events would come about, we would have questions about these events, and then these flashbacks could tell us the story that we need to know. We're given more surprises, are learning more about our characters as we go along, and that could lead to better development and drama. The verdict? The biggest thing that baffles me is I'm not really sure why this movie was made. I don't think a lot of people were clamoring to see a sequel to Snow White and the Huntsman. As is, it's not the worst thing ever, but it has a relatively bland story with some clumsy execution that doesn't make for much of a movie-going experience. This is Detective Steve, and on the subject of unnecessary fairy tale sequels, I'm not out of the woods yet.